welcome global travel and tourism leader Gloria Guevara Manzo in conversation with Skift editor-in-chief Sarah Kopit.
Gloria, thank you so much, first of all, for joining us here today. You have such an extensive background in travel and tourism. You've worked with Mexico, with Saudi Arabia, CEO of the WTTC. So I started earlier this morning asking the CEO of Marriott if he thought everything that is going on right now in the United States, and by that I mean tariff wars, travel bans, the stock market down 10%. Do you think, in your experience, all of that put together is going to impact inbound tourism to the United States of America, or is the USA really kind of like Teflon when it comes to travel?
I think it might impact, well, first of all, thank you for having me, and I wish I was there. As you know, I'm in the middle of a campaign, so greetings to everyone in Madrid, and please send my greetings to Rafat and the wonderful team from Skift. To answer to your question, it might have an impact in the short term, but in the long term, it will not have an impact because the U.S. is a great destination. People love to travel to the U.S. Also, you need to remember that U.S. is very domestic. 85% of the contribution of the travel and tourism to the GDP is within the U.S. A lot of people traveling within the U.S. and only 15% in international. So yes, you will see an impact, perhaps short term, but in the long haul, it's going to be okay. And we also have a good individual, Fred Dixon, promoting Brand USA. Yeah. Who's a fantastic job and is a great friend. So I think it's going to be okay.
So you mentioned your campaign. I'm curious, if you were to be elected Secretary General in tourism, what is the most difficult challenge that you would set out to fix?
Well, there are multiple challenges, and that's a great question. Our sector, first of all, many times is taken for granted. When you look at before the pandemic, as an example, 10% of the global GDP, that was the contribution for travel and tourism, which is one of every $10. When you look at the jobs, one of every 10 jobs, that was the contribution from travel and tourism. Now, when you look at the 5 previous years to the pandemic, and look at all the jobs created, we heard a lot about talking about technology, the apps, healthcare, but when you look at all the sectors from around the world, one of every 5 jobs, or one of every 4 actually, came from travel and tourism. So that tells you that our sector creates jobs, opportunities, and still today is taken for granted. So I think one of the biggest challenges that we have is to assign the right priority, the right resources, and the policies that help us to work together and have a long-term sustainable growth. So, and at the same time, that comes with multiple challenges because yes, we want to grow, but it has to be secure. We want to have seamless, that's very important. We need to be prepared for every crisis. That's very important. Every single incident is weather-related, security, geopolitical, impacts our sector. So we need to be ready. We need to learn from that, manage, and recover. So there are multiple challenges, but what I see the most is the opportunities also. 70% of the international travelers still go to the same 10 destinations. So there's still a huge opportunity for the rest of the world to maximize the potential and really create opportunities for their citizens.
So the world is, I would say, to put it mildly, in a bit of a precarious situation right now. I'm curious to get your thoughts about how you think travel and tourism can kind of bring the world together. I know that that sounds a little bit, touchy-feely, but I mean, it is something that travel and tourism can do, unlike any other sector. So can you talk a little bit about how, on a practical level, you've seen that work in action? Maybe give us some examples.
I have seen that in multiple cases because when you travel, you want to connect with cultures or you want to connect with the locals. You want to live their lives or in a way understand their traditions, what they do, why they think like that. And that creates bridges. That develops empathy. One example is when I traveled to the Middle East. For instance, I lived in Saudi Arabia for 3 years. Mm-hmm. But when I traveled the first time, I had a very different impression of how was Saudi. And for me, that first trip was significant because I was able to speak to women. I was able to see the reality. When you do that, that's when you have empathy. And when you have empathy, you have a better understanding. When you have a better understanding, that takes you to have peace. So our sector is very relevant to have a good understanding because if we don't have good understanding, we don't talk. And when we don't talk, there's no tolerance. And when there's no tolerance, that's when we have conflicts and we have issues. So the more that people travel, the better understanding. So we are an enabler for peace, in other words.
You brought up Saudi Arabia. There was a rather critical piece in the Wall Street Journal just last week about NEOM and about some of the difficulties and challenges they are having there. I'm curious to get your take on where you think Saudi is with that project and what ultimately will be the result.
Saudi is going through a massive transformation. I had the opportunity to live there with my family for 3 years, and then my kids went to university, and that's the reason that I left. Saudi invested $1 trillion in tourism. Half of that is going to NEOM, the other half is going to the giga projects, the airline, the airports, and all the things that you hear every day. But what's very interesting, this Vision 2030 is transforming the lives of the Saudis, but also is emphasizing the importance of travel and tourism and the jobs that they are creating. Now, are they going to be successful? That's your question, developing NEOM?
Yeah.
Absolutely, I think so. Now, would that be in the time frame that they were thinking at the beginning? Perhaps not. It's going to take more time because there are several factors. What I can tell you is that the country is being managed similar to the private sector with very clear KPIs, very clear metrics, quarterly reviews, like kind of board meetings. Mm-hmm. They track everything. For instance, in tourism, in the Vision 2030, we had the plan to achieve 100 million visitors, domestic and international. By 2030, we were able to achieve that in 2023, December of 2023, 104. That was 7 years ahead. So there are multiple objectives that they are achieving earlier, as usual, but there are some others that they will take longer. So in the case of NEOM, I think it's going to take more time because there are some dependencies that they have, but I think that they'll be very successful.
So in the audience here right now, we have leaders from travel in India. I'm curious if you can take any of the lessons that you have learned in your career and maybe speak directly to them with what advice you may have for across the board travel leaders specifically working in this region.
I think my advice would be India has an amazing potential, has been doing a wonderful job. When you look at the GDP growth and all the millions of jobs that they have created in the last couple of years, it's massive, it's significant. Now a lot of people are paying attention of the outbound. Everyone wants the Indian travelers. And a lot of the apps that are being developed and a lot of the solutions are about the traveler and about the experience. I heard of the previous conversation about AI and how do you enhance that experience, which is wonderful. Some of the best brains that I have met in my past life in Sabre were from India. The best developers, the best programmers. They are so creative. The innovation is the best that I have seen. But what I can tell you is that it would be nice also for them to look inside. When you look at this massive growth and the biggest regions of the world, like Europe and Asia was growing the fastest before the pandemic, or even in my own country, or you mentioned the US before, the domestic market is also very important. And it would be nice for them also to invest in developing their domestic. And when I'm saying domestic is, for instance, most of the development in tourism is top to bottom when you define the policies, taxes or no, regulations. But there's also a very important component bottom up. And bottom up means empowering communities. How do you help those communities to be ready, to have the right training, the finance, the tools, and discover that DNA so that they can create experiences in order to receive more travelers and share the benefit and that throughout the country. I think India has not one, multiple unique DNAs, totally undiscovered. And they are waiting for the private sector to invest, but understand how can they have this multiplier effect and helping them with this unique DNA in the south and the north, the east and the west to empower those communities and make those experiences so that tomorrow we can travel to India for not 1 week, but 2 weeks and have multiple destinations that you can go throughout the country and be able to have these unique experiences by using the technology, but also empowering and enabling their communities to control their future. I think that's something that I would suggest to them. India has a huge potential. They need to spend also more time and resources looking at their domestic, and later the international will follow.
For everyone in the audience, if you have any questions for Gloria, please get out the app and send them on over. I can see them right here on my screen. But before that, I'm curious about what you think about public-private partnerships as it pertains to somewhere like India, and how that could be helpful for the tourism industry at large.
Public and private partnerships are crucial. Without them, you are not successful, period. It's not that one can do it without the other one. That's impossible. The government cannot do it without the private sector. The private sector cannot do it without the government. I truly believe in public and private partnerships, and all my life have been working, creating those bridges. And that's why, going back a little bit about my candidacy, I have a letter of endorsement with more than 100 CEOs that they have signed, many of those very successful from India's Oberoi, Taj, for instance, or Oyo hotels, because these partnerships are very, very important. Just with these partnerships, you can be successful. And that's why you need to bring the regulator, the government, defining the strategy, but at the same time, the private sector is the one that creates the jobs and is the one that makes the investments. But they need to do it hand in hand. The private sector needs to explain what are their needs, the government needs to listen, and they have to work together in these solutions. The countries where they work together are the countries that they're advancing and moving faster, and they're being able to capture a bigger share of travelers, domestic and international, of course.
From your vantage point, what do you think is the biggest challenge for India in the tourism space and travel space?
I think India has some challenges like the rest of the world. They have some benefits with the demographics, of course, the biggest, and they have been growing very successful and doing wonderful. I think India, as I say, has an opportunity to capture more international travelers. They need to develop more experiences. They need to be able to multiply the opportunities in all these communities and be able to capture more. I know domestic is successful. International has been growing significant. The government has been doing a wonderful job. Just last year, 40 million jobs were created, my understanding. But I think there's also an opportunity to apply what they know the best. Listen, travel and tourism is a lot about people. The people in India have wonderful hospitality. They are very smart, the innovation is there, the will is there. It's just a matter of working together, public and private sector. But what I say is that how can they maximize the potential in the communities? They need to look at sharing the benefits and using these for solutions. Like, for instance, they were talking before about AI. One thing that is very important, how do we use AI to resolve the problems that we have in sustainability? How do we look at the use of, reducing food waste, reducing water waste, the circular economy? One example, for instance, that I heard recently, an airline is using AI to reduce the food waste in the plane by 40%, and that's reducing emissions. That's an example. How do you take that to the communities? How do you help the communities using these tools in order to make an impact and create more jobs, have a social impact, while at the same time foster the development of the sector? So I see India is going to be growing significant in the next couple of years, but not only outbound. Everyone is counting of the outbound from India for sure, but they need to grow inbound and also continue growing domestic as well. And by partnering with the private sector and helping the communities, I think they can do it.
How do you see, let's talk about talent for a moment. I think that the travel industry has an uphill battle sometimes with keep getting young people to come into the sector for a variety of reasons. How would you change that? How would you combat that issue and try to get more young people, either graduating from college, trade school, right out of high school, to come into hospitality and to travel?
That is a great question. Currently, 30% of the people that we employ are youth. And something that we need to do better is to promote our sector and position our sector. Sometimes the youth, they want a job that in a short time frame, they can move up and be a manager or be a CEO, and they are eager and they don't have the patience, right, to move up in a corporation, or they move and they change. I think what our sector provides is a lot of mobility. I have met some CEOs that they started washing dishes in a hotel, and now they're CEOs of a big corporation. I think our sector allows you to have those opportunities. Yes, you can be a manager, but you need to learn also the business, and you need to move around. Within our sector, you can move up, but you can also move to different countries, geographies. You will find people that started, for instance, in Mexico, and I met them in the UAE, as an example, working in a hotel, or in Spain, and now they are in another market. That mobility, I don't think that a lot of sectors allow that. So we need to promote more with the schools, with universities, and there are two groups. One is the technical group that we need, that perhaps these are students out of high school, that they don't have the opportunity to go to college. They can join the sector through the right training and, of course, be able to have a career later. But then you also have the professionals that we need them for the technology companies, for the airlines, for hotels. And those are different jobs, but they need to learn the sector. What I can tell you is that once you learn about travel and tourism, this sector is a passion. I'm a good example. My degree is in computer science. I worked for IT world for the first years of my career, and at some point I decided to change and swap and make my passion my career, which is travel and tourism. So the people that have been in the travel sector stay forever. So we need to explain that to the youth, share that, so that they can also get the passion and love the sector and be able to get more. But right now the talent is an issue, it's a challenge. We have a shortage in Europe and in some markets. We have not been able to recover that talent that we lost during COVID.
Yeah.
So we are in a catch-up mode, trying to train people, new people, in order to fill up those rooms and seats and experiences, because we don't have enough workers.
So young people, come and work with us in travel. I think that is a great place to end it. Gloria Guevara, thank you so much for joining us today via Zoom. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm looking forward to the new era of tourism. Thank you.
Thank you.